Good morning, everybody. We are going to continue on in our study of the 13 colonies. Remember last week on Friday, we talked about Rhode Island and how it was initially settled in 1936 by Roger Williams. And the first town in Rhode Island was Providence, and that was the town that Roger Williams founded. Remember, he originally was a separatist and he was a Puritan, and he was in Massachusetts. However, he was forced out of Massachusetts because of his um, disagreeing with the religious leaders. He was a firm believer that the church and the state should be separate. The church and the government, not the state, I'm sorry. The church and the government should be separate. So Providence was the first town in Rhode Island, and it was sort of established by Roger Williams and some of the people that went with him. It was truly the first English colony to allow full religious freedom. It was ruled by the people and not by the church. And Roger Williams also believed that the land should not be taken from the Native Americans, but that it should be purchased from the Native Americans. And that's what he did. He disagreed with the Puritans in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which is why he was going to be sent back to England, where he would have undoubtedly faced persecution, but he was able to escape from the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and the Native Americans whom he was friends with helped him with that escape, and they helped keep him alive until the spring. Another person who settled in Rhode Island was also a religious dissenter, and her name was Anne Hutchinson. She was very vocal in speaking out against the Puritan leaders in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and she and her entire family were put on trial. Well, she was put on trial for being a dissenter, and then she and her entire family were banished from the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and they also ended up in Rhode Island, and they established the town of Portsmouth in 1638. So just a couple of years after Roger Williams. Now remember, we said that a dissenter is a person who disagrees with the established religion. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. I don't need my notebook right now. I just wanted to make sure that we reviewed a little bit. The first thing I'm going to read to you is about the Middle Colonies. The only colony that we're not going to go into detail in this particular reading is New York. The two colonies that we're going to talk about today are New Jersey and Delaware. And also, just New Jersey and Delaware for the most part. And then we're going to finish up our unit. There's 2 more chapters, and we're going to talk about New York and Pennsylvania on their own in their own chapters. So about the Middle Colonies, New Jersey is the first one. The Duke of York gave the lower portion of New York to 2 friends who named it New Jersey after the Isle of Jersey in the English Channel. New Jersey was a proprietary colony managed for the benefit of the 2 men, so it was a private business originally. But they offered religious toleration and representation government to anybody who immigrated to New Jersey. That's pretty much what we're going to read about New Jersey. Delaware. The English had occupied the area that we now today know as Delaware since 1664, when they took it away from the Dutch. In 1682, the Duke of York gave the area to William Penn, who wanted it as an outlet to the Atlantic Ocean. The lower countries, as they were called, were represented in the Pennsylvania Assembly until 1704, when they were granted their own legislature. So it's the lower counties that of Pennsylvania that became Delaware. The lower counties did not have their own government, and they continued to be ruled by Pennsylvania from Philadelphia, so by Pennsylvania. And then finally, Pennsylvania. In 1681, William Penn received a grant of land from the English king to repay a loan that Penn's father had made to an earlier monarch. Penn was to be the sole proprietor of the huge tract, and at the king's suggestion, he named the land Pennsylvania, Latin for Penn's Woods. Penn was a member of the Society of Friends, a Protestant group known as the Quakers. They are a Christian. They're part of the Christian religion, but part of the Protestant sect as opposed to the Catholic sect, and their denomination was Quaker. Quakers believed that all people had something of God in them and were therefore equal. They believed that every man and woman had direct access to God. And it followed that there was no need for priest or church or for elaborate customs or rituals or even for dogma and creeds. At their meetings, the Quakers would generally keep silent and there was no planned program. They referred to themselves as friends of truth or sometimes just friends. Quakers refused to support the state church. They did not swear oaths in court and they would not fight in wars. Like the Puritans, the Pilgrims, and the Roman Catholics, the Quakers were heavily persecuted in England for their religious beliefs. Penn hoped to make Pennsylvania a haven, not just for his fellow Quakers, but for people of all religions. Because of the Quaker beliefs, slavery was banned, and only small farms were allowed and developed in that particular colony. So in Pennsylvania, only small farms were developed. Let's go ahead and slide on down to my map, which is where I should have started out, but I didn't think about it. We're flying back through time. Okay, here we are back on the map. Let's locate. Going to need to go up because these are middle colonies. See if I can get it. Let me grab my pointer and I'll stand back and maybe you'll be able to see it a little bit better. The colonies that we're talking about today, in particular, we're talking about New Jersey, which is this orange piece right here. It's below New York. Remember, it was given from New York. It was taken from New York. And we're talking about Delaware. Now, if you look up here, Pennsylvania, Delaware was originally part of Pennsylvania and was indeed ruled by the Pennsylvania legislature until the 1700s. These four lower counties in Pennsylvania became known as Delaware. So these are the two states that we're talking about in particular today. And these are the two states that we have left, the two colonies, I'm sorry, Pennsylvania and New York. These are the two we're talking about today. But these are the middle colonies, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Those are the four middle colonies. We have already covered the southern colonies, and we've already covered the New England colonies, this being part of Massachusetts. So now we are talking about the middle colonies, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Those are the four middle colonies, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. All right, let's zip on back through time, go to the 1700s. I mean, the 1600s. We're not going to the 1700s yet. 1600s, and here we are. So if you're following along, better pull that back down. If you're following along in this book, then we are currently, oops, not on that page. We are on page 88. Otherwise, it is in a PDF form in Bright Thinker. The middle colonies. There are still four colonies to learn about: New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. Those are the four middle colonies. These colonies are called the middle colonies. Both the southern colonies and the New England colonies attracted colonists mostly from England and from Scotland. But people from many different parts of Europe came to the middle colonies. Settlers came from Germany, the Netherlands, which we call Holland, and back then it sometimes was called Holland, and Sweden. Some of these people came for religious freedom. Some came to trade with the Native Americans, and others looked for farmland to grow crops. To get along, people in the middle colonies had to respect each other's differences. They had to respect the different religions, cultures, and language. Excuse me. A culture is the language, the religion, the customs, and the tradition and material possessions of a group of people. But we're not going to talk about the material possessions part. So for our purposes, culture is the language, the religion, the customs, and the traditions of people of a group. Colonists from different countries brought unique skills to the Middle Colonies. The Germans were very skilled farmers. The Dutch were good at building wagons and plows. We know what a plow is from Farmer Boy. We know that it's a tool that's used to prepare soil for farming. And the Swedes built strong log houses. The colonists taught these skills to each other, and sometimes they even shared ways to have fun. For example, the Dutch taught the other colonists about ice skating and bowling. Did you know that bowling came from the Dutch? Came from the Netherlands? What? Yeah, I didn't know that either. Sharing among different people caused cultures to mix, and the mixing of cultures helped the Middle Colonies to grow and to prosper. Like the New England colonies, the Middle Colonies had large forests. The forest provided lumber for building things like houses and ships. But unlike New England, the Middle Colonies were a good place to farm. The soil was rich, the climate was usually mild, and summers were warm and rainy. Many kinds of crops grew there very well. The early settlers grew different kinds of fruits and vegetables. Farmers grew enough crop to feed their families, and they also had enough left over to sell for a small profit. Soon, farmers grew cash crops just to sell, and the main cash crops in the Middle Colonies were grains such as wheat, rye, and oats. Because the Middle Colonies grew large amounts of grains, they were called the breadbasket colonies because those grains, wheat, oats, and rye, were used to make bread for the most part. They were ground into flour and used to make bread. And they were ground at a mill by a miller. After the harvest, many farmers took their wheat to a miller. The miller is a person who owns a mill, and he would then grind the wheat into flour. Now the farmers were ready to sell that flour in markets in big port cities such as Philadelphia and New York City. But how would they get the flour there? Farmers in Pennsylvania used the Delaware River to move their crops from their farms to Philadelphia. Farmers in New York used the Hudson River to move their crops to markets in New York City. Both the Delaware and the Hudson rivers are very deep and very wide. That made it possible for ships to travel almost 100 miles upstream. That's a long way, especially back then. When the farmers reached Philadelphia or New York City, they sold their flour and their other crops to merchants. A merchant is a person who buys and sells things to earn money. That's his sole job. Sometimes the merchants shipped the crops to other colonies, and other times the merchants shipped the crops to England or to the European countries. New York City and Philadelphia became centers for trade and shipping. They also became centers for the mixing of cultures. People with special skills and new ideas came to these port cities. They started schools, built libraries, and printed newspapers. Over time, different cultures, beliefs, and ideas began to create something entirely new, and that is what we call the American culture. Okay, let's see what we got here. How did the backgrounds of the colony settlers differ from those of New England and the southern colonies? What was different about the colonists that settled there? That's right. Most of the colonists in the New England and in the southern colonies came from England exclusively. But the middle colonies, they came from England, but not just England. They came from other parts of Europe. They came from Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, and England. They came from all over Europe. What kinds of things did the settlers in the middle colonies share with each other? And what did they teach each other? They taught each other games and various skills. The Germans, remember, they taught people how better farming techniques because they were amazing farmers. And the Dutch, they shared how to build better wagons and plows because that was something that they did very well. And the Swedes built amazingly strong houses. So that's what they shared is their skill at building houses. And like I said, they also shared games. Ice skating and bowling were two that they mentioned, and those were shared by the Dutch. Why were the Middle Colonies better for farming than New England colonies? Yeah, they simply had better soil. It was richer and the climate was a little bit milder. The summers were a little bit longer. They were warm and rainy, and many, many crops grew well in the Middle Colonies. Why were the Middle Colonies called the breadbasket colonies? They were because what they grew a lot of were the grains that were used to make bread: wheat, rye, and oat. What else we have here? How did the farmers in Pennsylvania and New York get their crops to Philadelphia and New York City? hmm They used the Hudson River and the Delaware River. They were called highways. They were the highways to move the crops. What two cities became centers for trade and shipping in the Middle Colonies? Well, if you said Philadelphia and New York City, you are absolutely right. And the main reason is because that's where the Hudson and Delaware River, um, they were able to transport their goods via the Hudson and the Delaware River to those two cities. What culture grew from mixing of cultures among the colonists? What do we call that culture today? We call it the American culture. That's right. How did the mixing of the cultures help the middle colonies to grow and to prosper? People from different cultures were allowed to share their beliefs and their ideas and even their skills. And the German farmers helped other people from other cultures to become better farmers. The uh, Dutch people helped people learn how to build better wagons and better plows. And the Swedes helped others to build better houses, so stronger and better houses. Okay, let's go ahead and get out our map. Let's start with the Delaware map. Oops, I got the wrong paper there. That's not what I want. I can go there. I want the Delaware map. Where are you? There you are. This is what your Delaware map should look like. It's in Bright Thinker. Let me go grab my pen and my marker. I forgot to grab those before. We are going to mark a few things on here. The first thing that we're going to mark on here is the capital, and the capital is Dover. So I'm going to go ahead and make a star with a circle around it. In my map key, write the word Dover. And I'm going to show you where that is on my map. It's about right about here on the map. I'm going to draw it in. It's a little bit in from the water. It is not a coastal city. That's where Dover is, right about there. And then the other thing that we're going to mark, it didn't mention it in our book, but I think it's good for us to know, is the first colony that was in Delaware, and that was called Lewes. Well, maybe it's called Lees. Probably Lewes because of the origin of the word, but it is spelled like Lees. Lou. It's OU that we do use at the end of English word. Lewes. And that is located, that is a port city, as most of the original cities are. And that's located kind of down here. See it? And then finally, the last thing that I'm going to do on this map, and it's really important because I want you to see the water. And the reason I think it's so important that you see where the Delaware Bay is and the Delaware River is that you will realize how critical it was to getting the crops to those port cities. All of this other state up here is New Jersey. Let's go ahead and label that too. I'll label that in a second. Let's finish coloring my water. Whoops. This is all water. This is the state of Delaware right here. I'm going to go ahead and label that water, and that water, part of that's the Atlantic Ocean. That's not the part we're labeling. But what we are labeling is Delaware Bay. I'm going to go ahead and show you where it is. That's that big area in between the states of New Jersey and Delaware. And the other thing that I'm going to label, just because I want us to have a good reference point of where these states are in relation to each other, is I'm labeling the state of New Jersey. This is New Jersey right here. So this is what your finished map should look like. When you have finished this map, go ahead and submit it, a copy of it for a grade, and then cut it out and glue it into your interactive notebook. All right, get out your other map that we're going to label today, and that's the map of New Jersey. Let me find that one. This is New Jersey. Now I'm going to show you right here. This is Delaware. We just labeled this. This is Delaware. This is New Jersey. This is Delaware Bay right here. All right, so let's go ahead and start out by coloring that water blue because, well, I still have my marker out for that. So I'm going to do that. And I'm also going to color along the coast of New Jersey, the Atlantic Ocean, because I want you guys to get a good idea of where the water is. I mean, where these colonies were in relation to the ocean and to bodies of water. Most of the colonies were found in or near a large body of water. This is Delaware Bay. This is the Atlantic Ocean. All right, so let's go ahead and start out with our capital. I'm going to make my star with the circle around it. The capital of New Jersey is Trenton. Trenton. T-O-N, Trenton. Trenton is located, see this little part that goes in? It's located slightly north of that little part, right about there. Trenton. It's almost on the state line, but not quite. That's where Trenton's located. And a city that you probably have never heard of, I know I didn't hear of it before I started this study of the colonies, is the first established colony in New Jersey, and that is Berg, using the of her, N, Berg N. And I'm going to write first colony beside that so we know why we're marking that. Bergen. The first colony of Bergen is found way up here near New York. Up here, right there in the northeast corner of New Jersey. Go ahead and marked it. See it? Marked it way up there. All right, and this is what your finished map should look like. You do not need to submit this one. You guys have a great day, and we'll be back tomorrow to take some notes in our interactive notebook about what we just learned in chapter 14. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.